We started Pivot just last year, and the focus is on helping people make smoother career transitions from one field or role to another. We focus on certain key in-demand fields and roles where we see a lot of popular career options and more people switching into. And content marketing has definitely been at the forefront of that. We have had a lot of people thinking about either joining companies as a full-time content marketer or kind of doing something on their own, where they are either a freelancer or even a content creator on one of these social media platforms and do things in a more entrepreneurial and autonomous manner. So I'm very excited for today's workshop because it's definitely been a hot topic, and so happy to do this one. In terms of Joydip, your background, we had discussed that you have had varied experience, over your career for the last 12 years. And currently you are with Zenoti, which is a B2B SaaS software company for salons and spas, and it's a unicorn. But yeah, I wanted to give you the opportunity to perhaps share a bit more about your journey and tell us like your experience in content marketing a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. Funnily, today I'm speaking about content marketing, but then when I started my career, I was with Oracle Consulting doing cold calls to Delhi and to places like Calcutta and Orissa, where I was just, trying to generate leads for the ERP CRM business. That's how I started. But then, although it's been great in that role, but then sooner or later, I realized that it's not a role for me. I took a pay cut, moved into marketing, and that is where my work with content marketing in general has started. And my first assignment was with Mr. Nandan Nilekani during the election campaigns in Karnataka back in 2019. And that was my first assignment, was to write content for election campaigns. And I had absolutely no idea. And I was thinking, like, who even reads content? Because it's all about the faces, but then people do actually read the copy, read the content. That's where I started with the political campaign, then moved into SaaS, moved into IT services. And, over the years, I have matured into a professional where my work is performance marketing, where we generate leads. And a big chunk of performance marketing happens through content marketing, content syndication programs. So it's all about, writing different pieces of content based on different persona. For example, if I'm selling a software, the way a CFO would interpret the value proposition of a software is very different from an end user, right? So the ways you position content, there are different formats of content. There could be graphics, white papers, webinars like the one that we're doing right now, right? It's always a mix of different formats and different types of content, different features of the software that we work with. And finally, the goal is to generate more leads, right? We're doing content marketing or any sort of marketing to solve a problem. The problem could be leads, problem could be awareness. So whatever we do in terms of content, we experiment, like, we can do podcasts, we can do a whole bunch of things, but the whole end goal is to create content which drives action from your prospects. The action could be them visiting your website or downloading a white paper or calling you up, or it should do some sort of behavior. It should add some sort of value. And where I feel content marketers excel is when they are able to measure the return on investment. They're able to measure ROI. I think that's where most of the importance of content marketing is.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Joydip. And Chelna, I've always found your role to be very, very exciting, primarily because you work with a lot of household names and brands, which I feel like are at the forefront of creating some new agey content that actually clicks with the end user, not just with the organizations and businesses, right? Obviously, Tata CLiQ Luxury is where you are currently, but you have had experiences with other brands as well. So yeah, please feel free to share a bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Thanks, Arjun. So, I am a former journalist. I think I come from a very, very different background to what Joydip has just talked about. So, I've worked with a lot. The way we are trained is, I think, so sort of rigorously. So, right from like my first job, which was at DNA, which is this now defunct Bombay newspaper, to content that I created at the Times Group, both for IDEVA and for Luxpresso, or, working with Condé Nast, or now with Tata CLiQ. It's been quite a fun journey for me. I've learned the different ways that content sort of interacts. I started out as a print girl, moved into digital content, interacted a lot with brands. So I think that also sort of helped me understand how brands think, what they want to, what they expect from content. So of course, there's that whole angle of ROI and, how many leads have you generated with all of this, but also it comes to, how you're building that tone of voice for your brand, how you are engaging with customers, how you're sort of inviting them to discover more, or just basically understand better. Whatever it is, it's a very sort of fantastic journey that I have had. We've used, and I think as a creative person, it's just when you have that opportunity to create this sort of content that just is so immersive, just so exciting. It's a really fun space to be in, especially now when a lot of brands are looking, for content that provides thought leadership, content that provides, a point of view or a tone of voice or whatever it is. So it's a great space to be right now, is what I have to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really booming right now. And, I've come across so many people who are thinking about a career transition. And recently it's like not just a straightforward transition that people are thinking about from a content standpoint. Sometimes they want to stay within their current field, but want to pursue something in content on the side because it's just so important and critical from a future career prospect, right? So yeah, no, definitely a great space to be in. So, if we were to kind of jump into the first topic of discussion here, some of it was already touched upon by Joydip and Chelna, you as well, which is kind of the evolution in the different career options that exist today within content versus, let's say even 5 or 10 years ago, look very different from a landscape standpoint, right? There has been a huge rise in the number and diversity of options that are available, right? So Joydip, for example, you touched upon like social media, there was blogs, SEO, you have webinars, podcasts, and so forth, right? And it can get overwhelming, especially for people who are considering a career in content or who have been doing something in content for a long time, but are now evaluating all the different options that exist for them today. So maybe for people, who are in that space, in that situation, Chelna, if you can maybe share a few thoughts and, kind of structured viewpoint on how should one evaluate the different opportunities, different career options that exist within the content marketing field today?
So honestly, this is a very creative space. It's a little bit hard to be very sort of black and white, but I think the best way to do it is to figure out what you actually enjoy talking about or what you have an affinity for. I have a lot of friends within the industry who will go and work for a fintech company, but maybe not enjoy that work so much, but then might enjoy doing something for, say, a health company or whatever it is. So I think really figuring out what your space is and where you feel you can sort of contribute and create that tone of voice. I just keep coming back to that, but it's, every brand that you work with has a very particular tone of voice. And I feel as a content creator, you need to be able to identify with that. If you don't, it becomes very difficult to be able to put across content with authority. So I think that is one of the key factors that you need to keep in mind, just figure out, it's a very sort of millennial Gen Z word that I'm going to use, but like figure out what your vibe is. So that's the best way to really figure out that. And then, of course, there are so many brands that are looking for content creators. Of course, if you are, comfortable with creating video content, it just depends on what the ask is. Some people require a lot of very creative, very magazine style content. If you have that experience, it's great. Some people require something that's a little bit more marketing forward. So, a lot of the stuff that Joydip does, a lot of, say, the SEO writing or a lot of the transactional communication, a lot of that marketing communication. So there are all these different fields, and I think it just comes down to who you are. I mean, as a copywriter, you will write one way. As a journalist, you are trained to write another way. So again, I mean, these are very specific to creative fields, but it just comes down to where your passion lies. I feel you really have to be passionate to be able to create quality content. So
I'll just add one point to what Chelna said. I'll just piggyback on what she said. I think she began saying that, it's a creative field. I agree 100%, it's a very creative field. And I'll tell you why. So we are into, I've always been in technology. And once I hired someone from fashion as a content writer for a SaaS industry for the US market. I mean, I have great respects for that person because she writes fabulous pieces of content. She's worked with the biggest brands. I'm not going to name that person, but then she just, I'll also use a millennial lingo. She just lost her mojo. She was like, this is dead stuff. You're talking about software. I hate software. That's what she said after like a week or two. So I totally agree. It's a very creative job. But then, when we're looking at the B2B industry, right, it is, I would say, like 50% creative and 50% data driven, right? We need to write content which will get more people to our website. We need to write content, which will help our SEO. We need to write content which will help us get leads, right? So, there is that part of it, but I 100% agree that if you put the wrong people in the wrong sort of, content writing job by industry, by vertical, I think that would be like a big disaster.
Sharing the overall, overview, I guess, of the content field. And Joydip, in terms of what you shared, it makes a lot of sense, right? People evolve, their careers evolve, their interests and skills also evolve. So somebody who may have liked, doing one kind of content may not always continue to do it in the foreseeable future. But tell me something from a emerging trend standpoint, right? Like content has obviously evolved into a space where you have a lot of different career options and a lot of different ways of creating content also. Like, for example, I'm sure most people are aware in the room today that AI is playing a huge role in creating the first draft of, copywriting content that's out there, right? What are some of these core trends that you feel are impacting career decisions for prospective content marketers?
Right. So, I'll tell you from my perspective, when, we were looking at, let's say, an interview happening, let's say 6 or 7 years back, when we're hiring for a content writer, or we would say somebody who can, that time content writer was loosely used with someone who can write email, who can social media, who can do everything, or who can write blogs, who can write research publication. So that definition of content writer who does everything on your company, starting from websites to all different channels, that has sort of changed and become more specialized these days. That's a trend that we have seen. Now we're hiring people who just write blogs. Now we're hiring people who manages only social media. We're hiring people who does only internal comms and external comms. Like 7-8 years back, there was just one person who would do everything. Now, the second change in trend that we have seen is, this is very specific to the IT industry, or consulting, IT, all of them put together in engineering industries, that the questions have also changed. For example, we typically ask them, so you've produced, like 10 pieces of content. How has that helped the marketing team, right? We're no longer talking about the quality of the content in terms of literature, but talking about the impact on business. So we also expect content marketers to understand stats, understand how their content affects growth of the marketing team, understand how it affects and impacts the pipeline that is getting produced. And I'm sure Chelna would also agree that it's the same in her industry also, because we're just not going to spend money writing content, right? But then at the end of the day, it has to produce something actionable. So one is that content writing has become specialized from someone who's just writing blogs and everything to much more evolved and advanced now. Like we have people who does only content for events. We have people who do only content for webinars. It's a very specialized profession now. And secondly, for every content marketing, either it's a webinar or event or blogs, we have numbers for them. We have targets for them in terms of, will you be able to increase traffic coming from the US by 10% in the next 3 months by content marketing, right? So it's become like a sales role, but obviously these targets are soft targets, right? They're not going to be thrown out of it, but then there has to be some sort of madness in the method. And, because as a whole, we should be focusing on achieving something, not just writing content. So these are the two large things that I've noticed.
No, I completely agree with you, Joydip. I mean, even when we create content, like we have a very sort of editorial structure where I'm currently working. So even when we've hired for roles, it's been very specific. You look at the categories that are important to us, whether it's beauty, whether it's fashion, and then you hire someone who has that expertise. And then my CEO likes to call, content writing basically art meets science. So you have that data that backs up everything you're doing. So you're right. You need to understand what your audience is looking for. I'm working for an e-commerce platform right now. So, we really have to understand what shoppers are buying, what sort of content they really enjoy for us, making sure that they're engaging with the app, exploring products. So we get all that data, we study it, and we see, how that content is really impacting the whole sort of shopper journey. So, time on site and stuff like that. So I just agree with what you're saying. You have to have that method to the madness. Otherwise, as a creative person, you can go all out. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think, what I gathered from that is like maybe content was slightly more art oriented because by the nature of it, it's a fairly creative field, right? And you don't want to box people in. But at the same time, when the business requirements come into the fray, you have to tie that creativity with an end business goal. And because of that, there's a lot of specialization and goal-based outcomes that are now in focus. So yeah, I think that's a great takeaway. I think what's a good segue from this topic is, what are the core requirements that businesses have from their content writers and content strategists and marketers, right? What are some of the core skills? And some of these you've already pointed out. But if we were to really, point out some of the most granular skills for a person who's starting out in the field, what would you say they should focus on in the beginning and as they grow in their career? That's the first question. And then later, maybe we can discuss a little bit more about what are the best ways to actually acquire these skills and improve them. So, Chelna, you want to take this up first?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the first things I look for when I am hiring someone is industry knowledge. How sort of deep is your knowledge of that particular aspect that you want to write about? So, for example, our fashion editor comes from a very sort of reputed men's magazine. If I am hiring someone to create banner copy, again, I would look for someone who has a little bit of, maybe ad agency experience. So I think it really comes back to you need to find experts in that field, or at least someone who demonstrates a passion. At the end of the day, a lot of this knowledge you can acquire as long as you read, you talk to people. But I think it just comes from the amount of knowledge you have. Of course, good writing skills. I'm a grammar Nazi. You need to make sure that, you're hiring people of quality. So when we do that, like we send out this whole very intense sort of pre-interview test where, we check people's editing skills, how well they know the market, trends, that sort of thing. So that is something that I think potential employers look for when they are hiring someone. It's not necessary that you have to have a lot of experience in that field, sometimes even a willingness to learn. So we've hired this, very recently, we hired this one young girl who really wants to be a fashion magazine editor someday. She did not have the required industry knowledge, but she had that enthusiasm. She has that passion to learn and, that openness to learn, which also can take you a long way. So, I mean, of course, it depends on what level you're joining and all of that. But I think it's just basically having that industry knowledge and that willingness to keep learning.
I mean, some of the basic things that have been part of content marketing for, a long time, like, just writing skills and, a way to clearly explain a concept or, complicated concepts to the audience. I mean, that's all been there. And recently we have seen more and more people getting into visual content creation as well, right? You have Instagram, you have TikTok and YouTube Shorts and all this stuff. So Are there any specific skills that you are seeing becoming more and more important in recent times from a hiring standpoint?
So one is, I would agree with Chelna what she said, that, one, you need industry expertise, and second, you would need the enthusiasm and the drive to learn things if you're not a part of the industry, right? Because not every day you would be able to, you will have projects which you have already done or you have experience with, you will have new things to do, right? So I totally agree with that. The second thing that we sort of look at is, one, there are great writers who write content, who love to write content. Second are people who are content writers plus they're marketeers, in the sense that they just don't write content, they also have the ability to work with different stakeholders and influence decision. That's a skill that we look slightly for mid-senior level, not as a basic entry level. But then if I have a content writer, who can go talk to my head of SEO or head of digital marketing saying, hey, this copy needs to be written in a different way. You need to probably do an A/B test with different types of CTA buttons. If a content writer can have these conversations with the marketing team, right, where there is a more holistic idea, apart from just writing great copy, writing great content, where you are actually acting as a partner to the internal stakeholders and helping them do their job better. If that is a skill that's there, then that particular resource is going to be a very prized resource inside the team, because I am 100% sure that the copy is great. At the same time, I know that there are a lot of valuable suggestions that are also coming, right? So that sort of marketing bent of mind or marketing skill is something that we always look for. And that becomes very handy, to your first point, that when we have to do visual content, you have to do a lot of experimentation. I'm sure Chelna would also agree. She would run like hundreds of A/B tests on a daily basis, on landing pages, on copies. And if a content marketer is not up for their job, if a content marketer feels like, bhai mere se itna content likha hi ja raha hai, what's the end point of it, right? If we don't have that attitude, if the content marketer is a part of that process, then it becomes quite easy. I think that's a very intangible skill that we always look for when we hire people.
Prabodh here, and he has a question about how to actually create content when you not necessarily have a large audience or cannot be easily monetized. Prabodh, feel free to share a little bit of context behind this question if you would like, and then we can have Chelna or Joydip share their thoughts on this.
Yeah, for organizing, it was quite.
Prabodh, I think your voice is breaking. Actually, we can't really hear you properly. Joydip, Chelna, can you hear him by any chance?
Is it better?
Yeah, it's slightly better now.
Yeah. So to your point, I was talking about, as you mentioned, that people are looking for various avenues of career change, or maybe adding one more feather on the cap in terms of career. And for people like us who have 15, 16 years of experience, corporate experience, and have developed some kind of knowledge or point of view about their field, and would want to write content on a regular basis, and maybe use it for monetization or helping others. What would you suggest, considering that our content creation is not a full-time job, we have other jobs, but this is something which we feel passionate about, and we feel that we can really contribute. So what would you suggest for people to in terms of the right path to build a steady content, and also and content which can be monetized and which can be be helpful to maybe a very niche audience? Maybe it may not be for masses, but it may be for some specific audience, finance function.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, I think got it. At least from my perspective, I understand the question. And I think, Chelna, Joydip, this is similar to what I was sharing earlier a little bit, right? Where sometimes people are not looking for a full-fledged career switch or career foray into content. They're trying to pursue it on the side. I think that's where Prabodh is also coming from. And perhaps it's less of marketing. It might be more around content, becoming a content creator of sorts, right? And developing a side hustle, perhaps. So any thoughts on that, Chelna?
So, I mean, one of the smartest things to do is sort of develop yourself as that figure of authority. Of course, that's something that takes time. But if you have that expertise in X domain, just really creating that content, creating articles, or whether it's videos or whatever it is around that subject, and being that specialist that someone can go to and trust. That's how influencers also sort of developed their own content, their own following. You started trusting their opinions on something, and this takes a little bit of time to build. Prabodh, for someone like you, I would say maybe, reach out to specialist magazines, see if they are looking for someone with your specific skill set, and, maybe you can author some articles for them. That's a nice way of starting out and, building this as something of a side hustle, or if you just want to sort of create that sort of content. Another space is LinkedIn. A lot of people do, share their thoughts, share sort of serious opinions on that space. So it's a great place to also, start positioning yourself as that voice of authority, if I can say that.
So I would just like to add one point, and probably, this is something that Pramod can do as like a research bag, is, Pramod, you could just figure out where is your audience. Are they on LinkedIn, like Chelna said? Are they on Twitter, Instagram? Where are they exactly, right? Do a little bit of research and see what are the other people in the same field whom you aspire to be, right? And, why reinvent the wheel when it's already there? Take some of the articles, right? Obviously, do not copy them, right? Repurpose them, reposition them, maybe critique one of the influencers' article and see what sort of reaction you get, right? So that would be like your dipstick. So you would get to know whether the copy that you're writing is actually good or not. See how people react to any criticism of, let's say if you're in finance, right? You can criticize the articles written by Sitaraman and see what sort of reaction people give to you. So that could be a dipstick for you to realize that which platform will work for you, what type of content will work for you. That will give you a reality check. Because I don't think we should guess, you should actually do some sort of research. And there are many tools online which can, if you're struggling with starting to write, there are many tools online which can help you generate captions. Try some captions, try some clickbaity captions, try some normal captions, see how it goes for you. I think you have to experiment. And like Chelna said, obviously, building authority takes considerable amount of time.
Yeah, I would just add here from my own experience being on LinkedIn and creating content over the last year. I think both of what you have shared, Joydip and Chelna, I would definitely echo that. And just one point that I would just add is that when you are experimenting, it's important to actually analyze, like go back and analyze what has worked and what not, right? This is something which actually is not always easily possible on different social media platforms, but slowly as content economy is taking off, creator economy is taking off, there is a lot of focus even from platforms like LinkedIn to provide the right kind of analytics tools to help people measure, based on real data, what's working and what's not. So it's important to kind of do that exercise after the experimentation. To look at holistic data rather than just making your content decisions off just a couple of posts or a couple of content pieces. But I think very relevant points there. The other question that I think is a very important one we have here from Rupa is, Chelna, something that you were alluding to earlier, which is you're developing your tone of voice and your vibe, as you called it in millennial lingo. So is there, again, it might be a combination of art and science, but Rupa's question is there some sort of a high level process that you can use to figure out that tone of voice for yourself?
Sorry, I was stuck on mute. That's an interesting question. If you're looking at it from the brand's perspective, that's a very, very different way of, there's a very different, very sort of scientific way of building that tone of voice that will come from the agencies, the marketing team and the content team or the editorial team sitting together to kind of figure out who their audience is. I think a lot of your tone of voice also comes from who your audience is, and if you're building it for yourself personally as an influencer, who you are also, because a lot of people are consuming that content because they buy into your lifestyle or they buy into your thought process or whatever it is. So depending on which side you are on, but I think at the end of the day, even the brand is a persona in that sense. So you are building that lifestyle. You really need to sort of, so when we do this, when you do it, when we create like our style sheets and stuff, we really think about who we're talking to. Then we'll put down the way we want to talk to them. So, is it, say, are you a sophisticated person? So if you read a magazine like Harper's Bazaar, they're very sophisticated, very chic, very sort of global. If you're, say, a Cosmo, you're very young, you're very sort of maybe hip and cool and that sort of thing. So that influences the tone of voice, the people you will interact with if you're, say, interviewing someone. I'm just talking about more from an editorial perspective. I'm sure Joydip will also have a point of view here. But it really, the persona you are trying to build will influence that tone of voice, the way you write, the words you use. So I have a long list of words that we absolutely do not use on the platform. I have another long list of words that we encourage everyone to use, but my list of banned words is longer. So it really, it's a very sort of thoughtful process. It keeps evolving also. So I think you have to be open to that. Rupa, does that answer your question, or do you have any follow-up questions? Sorry, I'm just taking the liberty here.
Rupa, feel free to share that with us if you want to unmute yourself and come up on the stage, or you can share it in the chat section as well. Yeah.
Oh, she said that.
Perfect. Great. So one of the things that we plan to discuss, and I'll get back to some of the other questions in the chat section here, but we are going to kind of bifurcate content strategies for B2B versus B2C brands, right? I mean, there is clearly differentiation, not just between the kind of content that's created, but also, and the target audience, but also, the channels that are used or the marketing strategies that are used, right? So, for example, white papers, case studies, blogs, these are sometimes more relevant for B2B, right? As opposed to your typical social media marketing, which is worked more effectively in B2C. But these are the basics, right? Chelna, I think you have spent most of your career in B2C, if I'm not mistaken, apart from journalism and all that. But have you noticed or identified any differentiating factors in terms of content marketing strategies that are definitely more targeted towards B2C, the end user, as opposed to B2B?
So let me just talk to you about how we've done stuff at Tata CLiQ. I think that's a great example. So, I mean, a lot of the time, again, it comes down to who your audience is, right? I mean, we are talking to that young, cool customer or whoever that person is. So a lot of your strategies, so then it comes down to the platforms that you use, the type of imagery that you use. It's all sort of tailor-made. It's very different from what you would see on a B2B platform, because that is tailored towards people who already have some sort of understanding of that industry. Whereas when it's B2C, a lot of the times you also have to educate your customers. So if there's a new brand that you are launching, you need to spend a little time, effort, energy creating content that talks about that brand, why you need to buy into that brand, or, that lifestyle or whatever it is. So I would say that is the key differentiator, because a lot of times your audience doesn't know who you are or what you are trying to, sell or put out there or whatever it is. I'm thinking with B2B, it's more about, positioning yourself as that market leader, as, that person of authority. So that is the key difference, really. But again, it comes down to a lot of the marketing strategies. So there are a lot of B2C brands that will do a lot of thought leadership content as well. But again, it's purely marketing strategy.
Joydip, any thoughts from you on this?
Sure. The way, and I can speak for the whole IT industry, and I'll give you a little bit of background also here. When let's say we are selling a consulting software or consulting services or a software like an ERP. So typically the sales cycle is about 6 months, starting from the lead that gets generated to the implementation. And the total end-to-end cost of that, the software plus licenses is, let's say, about $2 million or $3 million. It's a huge sales that happen. It's a large sale. Now, content plays a very important role. One in, like Chelna said, building thought leadership. That's a big part of whatever we do on LinkedIn, on blogs and all of that. It's like to build ourselves as like the leader in the market. The second very important part and role that not a lot of people realize that we also work with consultants like Gartner's, BCG's, Forrester, and we produce content to influence their decision, right? There's a reason why BCG would put Zenoti over all of them. There's a reason why, let's say, Forrester would put Oracle over SAP. It's because of the content, is because of the relationship, obviously, we have with them, but also a lot of it is driven by very technical, strategic content that we produce only for the consultants. Now, these pieces of content are not released to the public. They are kept between the organization and the consulting firms, because at the end of the day, they take this material and create the BCG metrics or the Forrester metrics, and they act as our salesperson, where they go and say, like, don't choose, XYZ software, choose Zenoti, because they have been influenced by certain types of content. So that's the content that works, behind the screen, which people don't get to see. But then the value of that content is much more than what it's actually put out in the market, in terms of thought leadership. So I would say that's a very, different strategy that we take for B2B market. But obviously, thought leadership, SEO, I think that's common for both B2B, B2C. But then I think for me, ability to influence consultants and making sure that our brand is up there in those matrices is one of the biggest differentiators of our use of content.
Here, right? Is there a decision-making framework or some key factors that you feel would be relevant if a person is considering, writing content specifically for more like B2C brands versus B2B brands? Or do you feel like there is a high possibility is that most content writers can kind of do both kinds of content creation for both styles of companies? Have you experienced that either way?
Well, I think, it's a tricky question, and I don't have an absolute answer for that, to be honest. There can be people who, can row both the boats, B2C, B2B, because, I know how to write great content. I've written white papers, but never in my life can do a reel with an influencer or give that. I can never give Kusha Kapila ideas about what should I do with like a Nike or something of that sort. I get a creative brain freeze there, right? So personally speaking, I'm not that person who can do both. I'm more comfortable with doing B2B content because that's what I've been doing. But then I'm guessing there might be people, who can do both, because, there are differences in the way we write content, the way we consume content for B2B, B2C. Let's see what Chelna also thinks.
So I agree with Joydip. I don't think I could ever do, the sort of content, the behind the scenes content that you talked about. I think it requires so much industry knowledge. You need to kind of sit there and understand before you create that sort of content. It's a very subjective space. So it's very hard to say that you can only do this and only do that. You can try shuffling me. You never know. You might you might be a creative journalist doing fashion content, but might completely enjoy doing these white papers or, a lot of this very specific niche content. It's a very subjective thing. It just depends on what your interest is, what your sort of bent of mind is. But that being said, once you develop an expertise in one space, you want to stick there. Or, it's very subjective, and it depends on interest, is how I would see it.
Yeah, and you become comfortable in that field also, right? You don't want to move around too much.
Yeah, like I don't think I would ever want to write anything on technology because I simply don't have that experience. But I would very happily write on, say, fashion or lifestyle because it's something I've done for 15, 16 years and it's something that I know and understand. So it just comes down to experience, to passion. It's a very, I would say, subjective space.
I agree. Yeah.
I think it goes back to, Chelna, what you shared initially as one of the most important factors, which is industry knowledge, right? So once you write in a specific field about certain topics, you kind of grow that expertise, right? And you will be able to write in a more informed and knowledgeable way. So I guess you may want to experiment with different kinds of writing if you have that inclination in the beginning. But as you start to kind of progress and you see, where you're getting more traction or what you like doing more, you kind of build, more and more of your repertoire in that particular industry, I guess. Makes sense. Next question is again from Rupa. Actually, she is again alluding to something I believe either Joydip or Chelna, one of you said, which is, most content marketers today are being held accountable to certain goals, right? Perhaps even soft targets. What are these specific targets that you are generally seeing? Because content marketers, they have an input in terms of the content they write, but there's so many other factors that influence the purchaser's final decision, right, which they may not have control over. So what sort of metrics, what kind of targets you've been seeing for content marketers?
So for us, typically, there are a couple of very basic hygiene metrics that we always look at. One is, let's say you're writing content focusing on a new particular keyword for SEO. So, are we able to increase the position of that keyword by writing content? Are we getting more amount of incoming traffic coming to our website? Do we have, more page engagement? Are people spending more time? Are people, is your content getting lower bounce rates? Or are people exiting from the page? So these sort of very basic hygiene metrics is what we look at. We typically look into conversions for content which is very sales driven. For example, if you're writing a white paper, we want to see how many downloads of that white paper we get. If you're writing an industry report, we want to see how many people want to register for a demo after reading an industry report, right? So it's sort of subjective. For blogs, those are the basic hygiene metric that we look at. But for high value content, we're looking at callbacks, demos, and number of people who have downloaded those.
So, I mean, I want to say I work both at digital magazines and at like an e-commerce platform. And for the most part, a lot of the metrics that Joydip would look at is something that a magazine would look at as well. So, your bounce rates, SEO is important for digital magazines as well. So, whether you're able to bring that organic traffic in and all of that. So those are metrics that you need to keep in mind when you're creating content. Again, that's how you know that, your content is relevant. There's no point in writing content that nobody is reading. That is not helping you. It's not helping anybody. So these are important. So when I worked at the Times Group, like we used to have our Google Analytics, data that we pour over to see the keywords that, people used. We figured out Bollywood, of course, rules here. So, I knew that if I used a certain keyword by the end of it, like, I realized so these metrics are in place to help you create more relevant content. Even on Tata CLiQ Luxury, when we create certain content, if it is very topical, we can see that, our time spent on site, which is a metric that we are sort of held accountable to, it does go up. It does then increase our the number of products that are viewed. And the thing is, you can't just let a content creator create content for the sake of it, because then it is not relevant to you or your business, or even a magazine website, for example. I mean, the magazine is meant to create that desire for that lifestyle, that brand, whatever it is. It's the same with the B2C brand as well. So, you need to have certain guardrails or a framework within which you create this content. No one's going to kill you if your numbers go a little bit up and down, or no one's killed us yet. But these guardrails are in place so that you can continue to create better and better content. It also pushes you, right? Like, you want people to sit on your app or on your website and explore more. So then you look at content that has worked and you say, okay, people like more content on, say, beauty, or more content that is expert-led. And then that just helps you build your content strategy. So it is a very sort of important guardrail in my opinion.
I want to cover here is again from a career perspective, which is job search, right? So again, there's a plethora of options today, not just in terms of the kind of roles, right? So there, I have come across people who are pure play strategists versus people who are actual executioners of the content, creators of the content, right? And people who do content marketing, analytics, and some who are generalists, right? So that's in terms of the role. But then again, you are working with brands on a full-time basis. You're working sometimes as a freelancer. And again, multiple career options in terms of the model of that collaboration with brands. So let's say if I'm again pursuing content marketing and I have all of these options available in front of me, is there a particular way to get started thinking about like, okay, this role might be better for me versus that role? And if so, what are some of the best ways to apply for that role so that I can differentiate myself or stand out from the crowd? Joydip, you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah. So, it sort of depends on the level that that person is applying for. Let's say we're talking about someone just out of college, fresher, has got like let's say bachelor's or something of that sort. So one thing is, for especially for the B2B industry, all the roles that we have are very, I hate to say this, but most of the roles are very industry specific. Like you need to have that sort of knowledge in the fintech industry or IT industry or something of that sort, which let's say a fresher would not have. But then what I have done in the past, and I've done in Zenoti also, we've hired people who are just out of college, just by looking at the portfolio that they've created. So these are people who have, let's say they want to come to Zenoti, they would write a couple of blogs about, let's say, how can Zenoti beat our competition? And this is very, very proactive behavior. Nobody has asked them to do, but then when they send out the resume, they put these links to the blogs. And it's always a delight to go and look into these articles because, it sort of differentiates them completely from any other application that has been there. So that is a good way to, get, your recruiter's attention. That's one part. Second, what I feel is for a mid-senior level, when, the skills that we look for is the strategic mindset, like you mentioned, right? So we're not just looking at a content writer, we're looking at a content marketer who can work with the internal stakeholders, influence decision, and able to contribute to the marketing goals. These are the things that we're looking at. But typically, any sort of portfolio comes very handy, and it could be either in fashion or whichever industry. But then any sort of proof that you have written the piece of content, which is good, definitely helps. And certainly, I mean, if you're able to say that my content has helped the organization achieve XYZ, even better.
Now, any thoughts from you on this?
Nothing to add. I think Joydip has covered it quite well. I mean, if you are starting out, build that portfolio. If you're looking at a B2C brand, for example, if it's a Nike or a Tata CLiQ luxury or whatever, people are looking for people that understand social also, because that's a very important way of talking to your audience. So if you have that profile, if you have been able to build it up, that really, really helps. Like every time I'm interviewing someone, I will definitely check them out on Instagram, see what sort of content they are creating, how appealing it is. So it really matters what sort of industry you are working in. But yes, that portfolio is all important. Like show some samples of work, no matter what level you are applying for. So that's just echoing Joydip on that.
Just one follow-up question on that is because sometimes we do hear this from users of Pivot. If they should be joining certain communities or taking certain, let's say, courses that would help position them as more capable or more serious candidates in content marketing. Have you ever come across any of these communities or courses, boot camps, etc., where if it's on somebody's resume, it kind of makes a difference?
So what I would look for, I mean, just as a bonus, is someone is, if someone knows graphic design, if someone knows how to stitch together a video, or just basically basic like Photoshop skills or that sort of thing. Basically, something that helps you add one more layer to your content. You already have your written content, which you're hoping that the person is already good at. And then it's just these small things that really can make a difference, but it's not like a requirement. I mean, when you're looking for a video editor, you're going to find someone who has like a full sort of, not degree, but has that training in that. But anyone with these extra skills, especially if you have a lot of social content that you're creating, it's always great to, maybe take a class or, a diploma or whatever. And LinkedIn, I think, has some great courses as well. That always just helps. It pads up your CV.
Yeah.
Correct. I'll add to that. There's one more platform called HubSpot. So they do this free content marketing courses, who want to get into like B2B content marketing. So that's also something that people can explore. It gives you an idea about the whole marketing funnel, how different sorts of content needs to be written to address parts of the funnel. So that's also like an extra resource apart from LinkedIn that people can look up. And these are free certifications that they can do.
Your different topics within content marketing. And thank you so much, Chelna and Joydip, for coming today here and sharing all your deep insights and experiences. Anything else that either of you want to add that we haven't really covered, or any, one big advice or tip to a aspiring content marketer? Joydip?
I think send your resumes to Chelna because she's been there in the industry for a while and is growing leaps and bounds. So I'm sure you get a good opportunity there.
I think he just put it on you, Chelna.
I know. Thanks, Joydip. Yes, TVs, no problem. No, I think it's just basically when you're creating content, just really have fun. Everyone gets so sort of caught up with like, how is my content performing and this and that. But when you create that quality content is when stuff will automatically fall into place. So that's the only thing I tell all my young writers, that just have fun when you're creating content because it shows in your work.
Awesome. I think that's a great point to leave with. And I think we're going to wrap it up slightly early, but thank you again to everybody who joined us today. I hope you were able to get some good insights. I also want to just share that we have industry experts like Chelna and Joydip on our Pivot platform who provide very personalized one-on-one guidance to you if you're looking for any sort of career advice, especially in your path towards becoming a content creator or content marketer. So do feel free to check out their profiles on our platforms. I'm sharing the link here. It's mypivot.work. And if you click on this link, you would be able to find both Joydip and Chelna's profiles. You can book a session with them if you like their advice on your career. And with that, just want to wrap this up. Thanks everybody again, and hope you have a great rest of the week, and happy Diwali in advance.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us, Arjun, and wish everyone happy Diwali.
Yeah, thank you, and happy Diwali.
All right, great. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.